And I'm back after unceremoniously running out of recording storage. Okay, so here we are. We have I forgot, I'm a dipshit. Forgot to add the +1 to his combat rating for charging. So with a 5 combat, +2 for his knife fighter trait, and +1 for charging, Killjoy should be at an 8. So 7 plus 8 is 15. And 10 plus 4, you know what? Shit, I don't even remember where we are. Alright, sorry guys. Like I said, I am not a pro at this. I got so wrapped up in the moment of trying to kill the architect with my mutant that I forgot to look at the battery, not the battery life, but the storage space. Alright. Let's just go ahead and start with, this is the damage check, I believe. No, this is the attack roll. Okay. We're going to run with that. So 7 plus 8 is 15. 10 plus 4 is 13. So he beats him by 1. So now his damage bonus is just 1. Then we've got his base is 6 plus 1 is 7 to 7. Look at that. So here's time for a rule you're going to love. So damage check is exactly what he needs to shock him. But because the architect is wearing a helmet, the architect is no effect on the damage check. The helmet is probably the most valuable piece of equipment in the entire game. And if you think I'm exaggerating that, ask any of my boys who have played this Brink of Battle system before. That's a huge deal. Turning a shocked result into no effect because you're wearing a head can, that's a big deal. So anyway, in this case, nothing happens. Now the architect says, well, I'm not okay with that. Priority passes to his player, and he decides, you know what, I am going to stabicate you in the face meats with my knife. So he's got his 2 at 4, and that's going to be versus Killjoy's 2 at 7, because he's no longer charging. We do not check weapon reach. Why? Because nobody's charging here. Because the Architect Apprentice is going to execute a stand and fight close combat action. Ta-da! So here we are, 2 at 4 versus 2 at 7. Oh, that's going to hurt. So this is a great opportunity to probably cover what's going to happen in the counterattack. Let's see if it happens. Alright, so the 3 and the 7 drop. So 7 plus 4 is 11, and 7 plus 10 is 17. So that is 6 difference. Now we have a counterattack. So the architect's attack was not sufficient and was sufficiently beaten by the defender's response that the defender actually sneaks in a counterattack on him. Alright, so let's look how this plays out. If the defender's defense check number is greater than the base combat rating, unmodified combat rating of the attacker, which in this case is 4. So he's 6 over, so 4, 6 to 4, a counterattack has actually happened. What, you say? You mean it was my action, I attacked, but because I didn't do it good enough, the dude throat cut me? Yes, that's the answer, pal. That's why I say when people fight, they both get wounded, they both get hurt. So in this case, the architect's now in some deep kimchi. We have a 6 difference, but because it's not a standard attack where the attacker has got the initiative, he's got the impetus, he's actively trying to kill you, because this is a counterattack, it's going to be taking that damage bonus and cutting it in half, rounding it down. So the 6 damage bonus now becomes only +3, because frankly, Killjoy didn't realize that this was going to opportunity was going to open up so quickly, and he didn't have the full effect and full thrust of his initiative to do that, to force that. So, and yes, there will be a trait released in the game that we've already got in Brink of Battle that will allow you to do full counterattack damage, and it's horrible, and Drew hates it, and I hate Drew for it because he used to use it on me with his damn elf captain. Anyway, sidebar aside, here we go. So we've got a 6 difference down to 3. So now Killjoy actually makes a damage check against the Architect Apprentice. Even though this is the attacker and this is the defender, because the counterattack happened, because, what is that, Jar Jar? Because the counterattack has happened, now the damage check is done in reverse. So, That being said, he's got a 7 resistance because of his armor and his con. He, as we know, has a 5 con. He's got a +1 for the dagger for his knives, and +3 for that damage bonus, that adjusted damage bonus. So we're looking at a 9 total going in for Killjoy, and we've got a 7 total going in for the Architect. Oh, shits and grins. So 19 for Killjoy, and 15 for the Architect. That's a difference of 4, and the Architect is shocked. Well, howdy doody that. Now, what would be even cooler is if that was the Architect's action, but Killjoy was actually, let's say he didn't charge first. Let's say the Architect charged him. Now Killjoy just goes in and says, okay, I'm going to do a stand and fight. All I got to do is hit that dude successfully to shock him, and then he'll be wounded and out of play. But then if that were the case, being that he's a true human and it just won't die, needs 3 shock results in a turn to take him out. So anyway, we'll just make that one a ancillary sidebar. But that's what would happen. So those things will happen. You'll see that come out in play. Now, so he went, so the Architect player has done his executed action. Now priority passes to the Son of Entropy player. So this guy decides, hey, it's a dogfight. So let's go ahead and just say that he did shock him twice. Now we're going to go ahead and charge. We're going to do a straight line movement in. Comes within 1 inch of the body proper of the model. And we're going to go ahead for 2 greatsword attacks. Because he's got, actually that'll be the commander. Let's call him the commander. He'll have 3. This is going to be a horror show. The Omega Zone Chainsaw Massacre. Alright, so I'm shocked. What can I do? Well, you're not dead, and you're combat ineffective, but you're not combat not at all. So, shocked models are combat half. So this Architect's going to be defending with his 2 base attack check dice. So he's going to, 2 base attacks, which is his 2 attack dice. So he's going to defend with his 2d10 plus, he's going to throw on top of that a whopping 2. So he's 2 at 2. The commander of the Sons of Entropy is a 6 combat. So he's going to be 3 at 6 plus 1 for charging. I remembered this time. 7. Right? So now we've got 3 at 7 versus 2 at 2. What do you think's going to happen, kids? Padam. So 5 plus 2 is 7 is his top. 8 plus 7 is 15. 15 to 7, that's an 8 damage bonus. The Greatsword, which he's whopping, he can use in 2 hands, does a 3 base damage. That's going to suck. Oh, and I forgot, we did weapon reach comparison. His is 2 to the 0, so we're good there. He's not at risk for counterattack, and unfortunately that can't be said of the Architect. Anyway, so his 5 plus 2 is 7 versus the 8 plus 7, 15. Yeah, so 8, 9, 10, 11, and his con is 5. That's a 16 damage check versus 7. Because his tax suit still applies. Well, look at that. 16 plus 1 is 17, and 7 plus 1 is 8. Well, that's more than 5, kids, and that's also, it will be a shock either way. So it's shock and wounded, so he's, boom, out of action. And the commander of the Sons of Entropy gets the experience point for wounding that model. We'll get to experience in the episodes that cover the campaign. You're going to love that crap too. Alright, so that is close combat in a nutshell. Any questions? We covered weapon reach, we covered at risk. Now you see why at risk is important. Because if Killjoy had stuffed it up, right, on his approach, and he could have had a counterattack, because he wasn't at risk because he had the higher weapon reach, that wouldn't have happened at all. So that's where rocking around with a greatsword in the wastelands is not a bad idea. Alright, so let's get over to, now that we've talked about weapon reach, engagement, at risk, counterattacks, yada yada yada. We covered charging, we covered stand and fight, disengage. Disengage you can read, it's not overly complicated. I don't want to take any more video time for it because you can just read it. It's pretty straightforward. Basically, you're deciding to get the hell out of combat in good order. If you pass your combat check versus the opposed enemies you're engaged with, all is well. If you don't, they cut you down likely. So there's the math. Anyway, that's that. Okay, so let's talk about one final thing, and that is engage with multiple opponents. This is important, and for those of you playing with true humans in your crew, you're going to look at the Myrmidon trait and take a second glance and go, maybe that's not a bad idea. All right, so we got two guys here, and we got one guy here. These are both here. Let's say, since we're going to talk, the last thing we're going to talk about in this clip is actually weapon gear checks. Let's say this architect had his weapon fail a weapon gear check and is now useless for the rest of the game. It's either jammed irreparably for now in this small, tight, fast skirmish, or he ran out of ammo, which is a more common problem in scrappers than in any game setting before, because, you know, it's all in short supply. And you can only carry so much with you into these dank, horrible, terrifying death zones known as Omega. All right. So he decides he's going to charge because that's his best bet, right? So he charges Killjoy. Why do I call him Killjoy? I don't know why. Killjoy. Charges Killjoy, right? And then the commander charges him. We go to turn 2. Let's say by a miracle of God knows what, the architect's grace, he lives. And now we're going to have these two cats next turn, all tokened up, and it's just little old me. This is going to be a bad day. Whenever a model is engaged in close combat with more than one enemy model, he suffers a combat half penalty for all attack and defense checks. Catch me? This cat, whether he's attacking or defending, will get his 2 dice, but he'll be combat half while engaged with 2 or more enemies. That's a bad day, trust me. If you're a true human and you expect you're going to get in close combat, take Myrmidon, because the Myrmidon champion trait negates that. And it also makes you immune to being outnumbered, suffering from panic from outnumbering checks, because you're used to fighting more than one dude by yourself, because you're that badass. However, note this. In all of the period 2, which was the modern era gunfight type games we played with Brink of Battle and carried over into the essentially same type thing, period 3, modern type combat, where you've got the gun as the premier battlefield implement, most of the time you will be shot at. We reduce the points on Myrmidon because most of the time you'll be shot at. It will be a much more limited arrangement where you're going to be charged in close combat. But because you can run out of ammo or have a weapon jam that makes your gun useless, those things still happen. So just keep that in mind. You know, if everybody ran around with Myrmidon all the time, then combat and close combat would be a different story. But at the same time, there are so many other issues with being shot at from range that you really kind of want to think that through. However, when I point out the stats for Killjoy, if I built him as a true human, I would take Myrmidon because I plan on getting his ass into close combat. I'm going to ambush him as much as I can, charge out and chop someone. As a mutant, I don't have that option because it's not, it's a champion trait for true humans. But then I go in, with other options being mutation traits and stuff. So anyway, it all works out in the end. So just remember, when you're engaged with multiple opponents, it can be a bad day. And that doesn't change anything. All the weapon reach is still compared and all that stuff's fine, but you're still going to be combat half no matter what. All right, guys. With that said, we're really done with combat. I'm looking through the book here. I don't see anything we didn't cover. You understand all of it, and I don't want to run this too much longer. This will be part 3 of episode 7. I now have 2 other parts that I'm uploading right now. It's going to be a few days before they all upload because they take forever in a day to upload. The next subject we're going to get to, before I forget, because I'm a doddering old man, let's talk about weapon gear checks. All right. Woo! Look at that. Okay. So, Gear checks in, holy crap. I don't get paid money for doing this. I'll lose my job. Gear checks are basically representative of a couple things. Do I have the smarts to make this piece of gear in the game work, which is what you do sometimes with artifacts, or you make a gear check when resolving an actual scrapper event, scrap token event. A gear check is basically a command check that the model makes. It's on a D10, same thing, 1D10. Only combat uses multiple D10s, so 1D10, and it's a meter beat scenario using your command rating. So you do want to buy guys that have some smarts, because idiots don't win wars, unless you're Forrest Gump. What the hell did I do here? Okay. Somehow I managed to not only knock the camera out of alignment, I can't get it to stay. Okay. All right. Whenever you are rolling your dice for, I'm so sorry. Okay. Gear checks. So that's the majority of them. You're going to have gear checks with events. Some of the events you might have to have gear checks for certain artifacts, etc., scarce gear, whatever. You'll find them in the rules. They'll tell you for a gear check, and that's basically a command check. Now the opposed roll is going to be 3, 5, or 7. The difficulty should be listed when it describes that you need to make that gear check, 3, 5, or 7. When it comes to weapon gear checks, now we're bringing in the abstraction of my gun broke, and these skirmishes are so quick and so fast, I will not have time before the main events have been resolved to fix the damn thing. Or, as I mentioned earlier, I just flat out didn't carry enough ammo. Okay? So, here we go. We've got 2 viable targets. I've got my auto rifle, and I want to shoot the shit out of one of these guys, or maybe even both. But what I got to do is I've got to roll my 3 dice because I'm doing standing fire. So let's forget about, for the moment, the defense checks, because those ultimately won't matter. Let's see. No, first shot doesn't have a problem. Second shot doesn't have a problem. Third shot doesn't have a problem. Oh, come on. Can I just roll a 1 for the life of me? If this actually mattered, I'd roll like 1s all the time. Oh my God, there's a 1. Look at that. When you're using your standard ranged weapons, okay, when you're rolling your full dice for whatever rate of fire you're shooting at the time, regardless, based upon the action you're taking, if one of those or more of those dice turns up to be a 1, you have to immediately stop and make a weapon gear check. Ta-da! And that's going to be opposed by your opponent, and he's going to add 5 to his roll. And it doesn't matter what weapon you got. If you're forced to make a weapon gear check, the opposed roll is a D10 plus 5. It's a difficulty 5. Okay? That's a standard fact. So, I take this guy's command rating, which is a 4. I cannot substitute this with his commander's command rating because that only applies to panic checks. So, forget about that idea if that's what you were thinking. And so it's going to be so 5 plus 5 in this case is 10. I've got a 4 command, so I got to beat a 10. 7 plus 4 is 11. All right. I was able to resolve my weapon gear check, and my attack continued as is. So these dice then, we pick the highest, which is the 8, discard the other 2. I'm good to go, bright as beans. Now let's say I blew it. Let's say I got a 2 plus 4 is 6. I failed the gear check. Well, now that assault rifle I've got is useless for the rest of the game. Don't cry me a river. This is a resource management game. You should have seen this coming. Fortunately, being the proper planners that they are, the architect, commander of this team, decided that he was going to get some extra ammo for some of his dudes, and they got some involved. So I have extra ammo on this guy. Guess what I get to do? I get to discard the extra ammo. It's a one-time use, and I get to kick that damn weapon check concept to the curb as an automatic pass. Ain't that grand? So yes, carrying extra shit on top of what you got is important, because you're carrying extra ammo. It counts 1 point for encumbrance, so there's a trade-off. However, the first failed weapon gear check you have in the game, you can discard that, write it off your roster, boom, pass it, and keep shooting down range. Otherwise, that thing's useless, and then you got Revenge of the Mutants, and you're packing a knife. So anyhow, that's weapon gear checks in a nutshell. That brings us to the witty conclusion of this wonderful combat actions soiree. I've been a little more jocular tonight than before, and I think that's because I've realized that you guys are like me. You want to play great, awesome games and understand the basics without a whole bunch of frills. And I thank you for your feedback on Facebook. It really does. I really listen. I truly do. And we just want you to have some of the most dynamic, tense, exciting, badass games you can have in this melted down dead earth known as Scrappers. And with that, I'm your host, Bob Faust, signing off again. We'll catch you next time for episode 8, sometime probably later this week or weekend. And that's going to go into scenery and terrain and how all of that wickedly awesome, beautiful stuff that we spend hours making, right, rah, 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 how all of that impacts how your dudes move and fight. And then we'll start moving on from there and get into other juicy tidbits. Have a good one.